Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to be here, and we at Con Edison have been very pleased to support the MAS Summit for New York City since its inception 3 years ago. The summit has been tremendously important to the city as a way to discuss smart new approaches to our own unique form of urbanism, that is New York. It provides us all with a chance to meet others from industry, government, the community, arts and culture groups, planners, and designers, to compare notes on what we think is working well and where we need better approaches. I have watched this event grow and find its place in New York's ecosystem of city building as we consider the future of New York City. Here with us to consider this future is my friend and New York City public advocate, Bill de Blasio, joining us for a brief conversation with Crane's New York Business Assistant Managing Editor, Erik Engquist. Please welcome Erik and Bill.
Inviting me here. Let's talk about development. We have 12 minutes. We're going to be quick. We're not going to be long-winded, right? We're going to be spicy.
Spicy, okay. We're ready.
ULURP. It's kind of a cumbersome process, but it's what we have. It's what we've had. It's a 7-month process. But before ULURP, we hear a lot of complaints from developers that it takes too long to get to the beginning of it. The Bloomberg administration has said it's working on speeding that up, the pre-certification process. Mm-hmm. Have you paid much attention to that debate? Because the headlines always go to the vote at the very end of the day. But aren't there a lot of issues that concern you leading up to that point?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Erik, and thank you to the Municipal Art Society. I think this is a fantastic summit and bringing up crucial issues, and this is one of them. This is a discussion that we're not having in this city, and we need to. I gave a speech at the Wagner School at NYU back in July, and I said, ULURP, there's a lot to like about ULURP. The problem is before we get into the core of that process, the certification process is unduly long, cumbersome, unreliable, unhelpful to speeding the right kind of development, the right kind of economic activity, the right kind of job creation, and actually hindering, I think, of the kind of work that government and the community need to do to get the maximum community benefits and needs addressed in the process. I think we elongate the process unfairly, unnecessarily. And the age we're in now is one where we have to be constantly aware of what government needs to do to spur on economic activity. I think this is centrally the role of city government at this moment. Maybe that was less necessary in the past, but we're in a structural economic crisis that we're going to have with us for quite a while. Fixing pre-certification, making it reliable, making it simple with date certains, I think will speed development substantially, help us get economic activity, job creation, tax revenue, but also help us define what we can and cannot accept in the development process more definitively on the front end.
Seems to me that that's something you could do without spending a lot of money. I mean, the easiest way to spur development is to give developers a tremendous amount of money to do it, but since we don't have that anymore, it seems to make sense to look to other
just quick follow-on. Time is money. I'll coin a phrase here. Time is money. And I've heard from a lot of developers, if they had that reliability, if they had those more compressed timelines, it would be so much more beneficial to their economic forecasting, their approach to their work, that would make it easier actually to make substantial concessions to governmental and community needs. They're actually burning up a lot of the resources we would like to apply to the community are being burned up in that long, dragging pre-certification
And
process.
What about the 7-month review process itself, where community boards give an advisory opinion, the borough president gives an advisory opinion, and then at the end of the day, the local council member, 1 out of 51, decides whether the plan...
Well, the local council member per se, and I can speak from experience, isn't the only person who makes that decision. It really is a collection of forces at play. I actually think the community board role in many cases plays a very good framing has a very framing impact on the discussion that's helpful. Ultimately, it is the full council, not just the council member. I don't think in that ULURP process per se we have the core problem. I think, again, the problem's on the front end. I know the Bloomberg administration has taken some baby steps towards solving the front end problem. I don't think they're anywhere near what we need.
Mm-hmm. Gentrification. When I say that word, does that have a positive or negative connotation to you?
It's both. It's both. I mean, I live in Park Slope, so I'm an expert.
I was prepared for that answer, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay.
I am an expert. I love my community. I have perspective. You have perspective, longtime Park Slope resident. I was in the early 80s, while still a student at the NYU Metropolitan Studies program. I had an internship in Park Slope when it was in its troubled times. Moved in 1992, 20 years ago, saw it through changes, you know, the values going up, more stability, more safety, and then there was a day, which I remember vividly, because we bought our most recent house in the year 2000, there was a day where if you had not bought property, good luck to you, because suddenly everything was $1 million. It is always a mixed bag. I think so many communities in this city have benefited from elements of the gentrification process, but the challenge going forward is a diverse, affordable New York City, and I'm not sure the planning has been in place to achieve that. You know that I controversially supported the Atlantic Yards development because I thought it was a way actually to address gentrification that was getting out of control in our area by ensuring a certain new stock of affordable housing would be available to people. I want that economically diverse New York, and I actually think government is going to have to take some more substantial steps working with the private sector to achieve that.
In other words, we cannot let gentrification just sort of evolve on its own. You think it's something that has to be managed by the government? Unquestionably.
I mean, look, I'm not the expert of many people in the room, but the model we've seen in some parts of the world of the central city becomes only for those who can afford it, and the ring suburbs become the place for the poor and the working class. You know, I don't think New York City was ever destined to be an undiverse place. I think our whole history is about economic and racial and every other kind of diversity, and that's necessary to who we are. The government needs to play a role. I'll give you another example, what we talked about at the beginning. A different approach to the development process, I think, frees up more resources for the creation of affordable housing. I don't think the path we're on now is enough. I think we have to address it more forthrightly. A different approach to the federal relationship to the cities. I think one of the big stories that needs to be talked about here is what happened to the federal government having an urban policy. We haven't seen that for quite a while, probably since Newt Gingrich becoming speaker in 1994. I think the leaders of this city and other cities and states have to get together to recreate a demand for actual federal support for cities in terms of things like affordable housing and mass transit, because we're the economic engines of the nation. So I think there's a number of structural things that have to be addressed if we want to maintain true diversity and manage gentrification properly.
I'm going to try to get you in trouble here because your good friend Andrew Cuomo was Secretary of HUD in the post-Gingrich era. So are you saying that he missed some opportunities to do?
No, I worked for Andrew Cuomo at HUD for 3 years, and I was the regional coordinator for New York State and New Jersey, and I have to tell you, I spent many a day in Secretary Cuomo's office as he fought to keep HUD alive. So I actually think it's the other way around. I think if he had not been as able as he was, that agency's existence was in doubt. In those days, we did 220 senior housing, for example. There were programs that were focused on addressing affordability fundamentally, and it was regarded as a federal responsibility to work with cities and states. That has declined and declined and declined. Now, smart people in this audience will say, well, isn't that about the overall economic dynamics of government? Yes, to some extent it is, but it's about the priorities of government too. And we still haven't entirely rebounded from the Gingrich revolution, made worse, of course, if I may editorialize, by George W. Bush. There's a reset that has to happen because our economic futures, this is about the whole country, our economic futures run through our cities. Nowhere is that more true for this country than New York City. So the federal government cannot absent itself from its responsibilities, but there's not a fundamental political demand that happen. We've yielded too much to the Tea Party. I think the leaders of this city going forward are going to have to really make that demand forcefully and cause a reset in federal policy.
The argument being that, well, would you come out and say, look, we're providing all the tax dollars to the red states?
We're providing the innovation. We're providing the place that the greatest minds around the world want to come to. I mean, I have had my disagreements with Mayor Bloomberg, but I think the Applied Science Center on Roosevelt Island is a tremendous step forward, not just because of what it will directly do, but because it's building up New York as a place that talented, capable, innovative people from all over the country, all over the world want to come to. So my point would be that the federal policy needs to recognize if cities don't thrive, our overall national economy doesn't thrive, especially in a more internationally competitive economic environment. And let's face it, I've said this many times, it's not just nation versus nation, it's city versus city. We have our own competitive strategy, and I'd like to see it deepen and be clearer and stronger vis-a-vis London or Singapore or Shanghai, and we have to take care of that. The federal government doesn't watch our back when it comes to city competition, but when it comes to national competition, I think it's fair to say strong, vibrant cities lead the way in the national economy. But good luck finding federal policies that align to that reality.
You know, the cities, actually, our city hasn't provided a lot of money that it used to provide. For instance, when we build a park now, the game is the city provides the capital funding, and then after that, the park is on its own to come up with operating funds. What are your thoughts on that dynamic and the result of that, which is towers in parks, apartment towers, residential towers, and other development to fund the operations of those parks?
I'm enough of an economic realist to say in some places that's the best approach. I certainly believe that in the case of Brooklyn Bridge Park. Brooklyn Bridge, which I'm very intimately was involved with as a councilman. Brooklyn Bridge Park is going to be, I think, stunning in the positive impact it's going to have on this city when it was built out. There wasn't a practical way to achieve that without some private development. At some point, that may no longer be the case. And would you rather have none? Yes, of course, as a matter of policy, you'd rather have none. But practically, it was necessary then to get done. The important thing was to manage it, to have the least negative effect, the most positive effect. There are some parts of the city where there's not a realistic way to do, as you, I think, summarized accurately, to say we're going to build a park, but after that, the maintenance has to be found somewhere else. Some places that's possible, some places it's not. But I have to tell you, looking at the whole of the city and the demands on us from so many quarters, I think where we can do it the right way, and there is a private sector involvement, that's perfectly acceptable. And by the way, in the case of Brooklyn Bridge Park, that benefits a lot of people who are working class and middle class people in surrounding neighborhoods, or folks in housing developments like Ingersoll houses or Farragut houses nearby. That's a case where private sector involvement actually helps everyone.
We've got about a minute left. I want to just talk briefly about education. You've come up with your own education plan. It involves a tax that would fund more early childhood education. But setting aside the notion of we need to spend more, what is it that we need to do differently on the education front?
Well, I'm going to answer it with two parts. One, what I proposed was a 5-year tax on folks making $500,000 or more, so that we could get to truly universal pre-K, because we have anything but universal pre-K right now. We have a lot of kids who don't get it. We have a lot of kids who only get half-day pre-K, which doesn't make our school system work. It doesn't make us competitive in the world if our kids are not prepared to be on grade level throughout their educational experience. I also talked about after school and extending the school day and extending enrichment through after-school programs, particularly aimed at middle school kids who are on a very vulnerable moment in their trajectory. That modest investment in the scheme of things, well, that tax generated about $500 million a year for 5 years. But it would allow us to reset a lot of what we do in education and use the very substantial amount of money we're putting in right now, over $22 billion, use it more effectively, because our kids would be prepared from the moment they walked in the door at first grade. That, to me, is smart investment, also necessary for future social fabric, public safety, and the kind of workforce we need for the future. You would then say, okay, maybe you'll stake me that. Well, what about our current practices? I would say there's a number of things that need to be reformed. I don't think the curriculum is correct in a world where we're teaching to the test, and test prep is so dominant in so much of our curriculum. I think that's not a 21st century workforce curriculum. That needs to be changed. I think we've made some real strides in terms of continuing to find a way to get the best workforce, the best teachers, the best principals. I think there's more we need to do on that front. So to me, some people came up to me after the speech I gave at Association for Better New York and said, well, look, we're interested, we're open, but we want to make sure our money is well spent. Well, by definition, I'm saying in part, this is how all of your money gets better spent, but I think all of us in government at this point in history have to show people that we're continuing to improve the product we provide if we want taxpayers to invest in it.
Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Thank you. Do we exit?